like to call the Public Employees Committee meeting to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Rota.
Present.
Alderman Vollmer. Alderwoman Hubbard.
Present.
Alderwoman Murphy.
Here.
Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Here.
Chairwoman Howard.
Present.
5 present, you have 4.
I'd like to take a moment to review the minutes from our last meeting on June 27, 2019. Looks good. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the...
So moved.
Second.
Call the roll.
Alderman Rota.
Aye.
Alderman Vollmer. Alderwoman Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Murphy.
Aye.
Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Chairwoman Howard.
Aye.
5 aye votes.
At this time, I'd like to vacate the chair and allow the co-chair, the Alderwoman from the 13th, to take over the meeting while I present Board Bill 200. Go ahead. Okay. I'd like to present Board Bill 200. This board bill regulates employer and employee working relationships between the City of St. Louis and all employees under the classified service, including a compensation plan, terms and conditions of employment, benefits, leaves of absence, and authorization for a deferred compensation plan. Repealing Ordinance 70791, allocating certain other employees to a grade with rate and including an emergency clause. The provisions of these sections contained in this bill shall be effective with the start of the first pay period following approval by the mayor. This bill offers all civil service employees a pay raise, and effective the end of March, the first pay period at the end of the March, they will get a $1,000 added to their check and then a 3% raise. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to the Director of Personnel, Mr. Frank, for questions.
Thank you, honorable members of the committee. It's my pleasure to be able to present this to the Board of Aldermen. It's been some years since we've had a lot of progress for our civilian employees in particular, and I think this represents a real positive step forward in what we'll be able to do in the next 2 fiscal years. We negotiated with our civilian unions, and some representatives are here. But before I do that, I'd like to introduce some of my staff members who also may field questions. I have Linda Thomas, who's my Deputy Director, Kathleen Tanner, who's Deputy Director, and then John Understall, who's the author of this monstrous piece of legislation. Who his memory, as I get older in my years, I may forget a few things. So John will be here to answer any specific questions about some of the minor changes. But we did reach agreements with the Carpenters Union. We reached agreement with the trades group, which we had 6 members, but we're still waiting on the 5th member, the IBW Local 2. I'm not sure if they still have active employees in the city or not. But we did reach an overall agreement with the trades group. We reached an agreement with the Civilian Personnel Division, which is represented by Jack Conway and Jeff Ortis here as well. And we also reached an agreement of support for the airport police. We're still working on the finalization of that agreement, which includes a lot of operational issues, but Jeff spoke in front of the Civil Service Committee in support of it. And then also we have an international member from AFSCME here. I don't know the results of that yet, but we're working closely not just on pay issues, but also on improving some relationships with our valued employees at AFSCME, with refuse and airport, and also with the water division. Got that. This does include a one-time increase of $1,000. It is, in a sense, an important kind of stopgate measure as we struggle with a lot of vacancies. We want to reward people, and we thought this would be a really wonderful way of doing it, right after tax season. So it would be a one-time pensionable increase of $1,000 for all full-time civil service employees, with the exclusion of police and fire. And their exclusion is only based on the fact that we're continuing in negotiations with our valued commissioned officers and also our firefighters. We're looking at crunching a lot of numbers and hope to have some competitive kinds of proposals for them within the next several weeks. So we are still engaging in productive negotiations with commissioned police and fire, so they're the exception. But everybody else would get this on their April 17th check. And then in addition, we have doubled the standard merit increase. The board was gracious enough several years ago to implement a step system, because our prior system of just open ranges didn't work. You could never see the end of the day. Here, this allows people to jump 2 steps. So it would be at least a 3% increase. And that is both for the next fiscal year 20 to 21, but also fiscal year 21 to 22. And importantly, we have hundreds of people that we found out who are sitting at the top of that pay range. We don't care. We are granting them, we are tracking that, and we would grant them that 3% for both years as well. That's really important for us, and it was important in our negotiations. The board probably knows, as I've talked about it before, but we are in the middle of a citywide compensation and benefits study. I'm excited about that. We will finally see where we're at in relation to other public sector agencies, particularly in this region, and also other people whom we identify as competitors for our employees. And we're looking at not just salary, but also we're looking at benefits. So this is an important measure to kind of hold us over, to make us as competitive and really give a ray of hope to our employees while we finalize, that study. I've been told that we're about halfway through. Our consultants are looking at 600 job classes. We hope to have that in April, and then I will be meeting with my staff, analyzing it, and presenting it to the mayor and the Board of Aldermen and Civil Service Commission in terms of what our results say. So those are really the highlights of the bill. I would defer to John if there's any other changes that you think are noteworthy for the Honorable Alderman to hear at this time.
Most of the other changes.
John, come over
here. Introduce yourself for the cameras.
Yeah, my name is John Understall. I'm the manager of the classification and compensation section here in personnel. I can go through just the highlighted changes that we did by section, so you can kind of follow along. It is a big pay bill, but there isn't a lot of changes from the last pay bill. In section 1, which is just our listing of classifications and all of our coding and schedules, we had a couple changes. Construction equipment foreman 1 and 2, customer service manager and secretary and stenographer, it's a hard word to say, to the mayor. We changed just for our internal coding, the class code, which we group by job families. So they were just in the wrong job families. So for organizational purposes for us, just made those coding corrections. Airport power plant manager is the one grade change that we have, going from 15 to 16. That was a position that has direct reports at the same grade, so it's a correction to ensure that there's no parity issues in that position in the future. Schedule changes, we've got 2 schedule changes: accounting coordinator and housekeeping manager. One accounting coordinator going from the M schedule to the G schedule. Housekeeping manager going from G to M. Those schedules don't mean a whole lot since we have the same schedule for M and G. It's just how we internally look at them being management or within the general groups of positions.
Just a point of clarification, I don't
We
wanna.
could say, are you finished with
No,
your
no, I wanna make
presentation?
sure,
We can take
before, I wanna know, is that proposed changes to this bill? In other words, are you amending this, or is this,
From the
this
previous.
bill is, you're talking about changes from the previous
Yeah.
to
questions.
the?
They're already in here, yeah.
Okay.
791. So those are the changes to the previous bill, which I believe is the back of the one that you guys have there. A couple classes that we deleted aren't using these classifications anymore. It is, as you see, a very large bill as far as the classification. And we've been trying to, as we go along, eliminate classes that just aren't being used anywhere within the city anymore. So that's what those drafting supervisor, fingerprint tech, and veteran services officer classifications that we have deleted or are proposing for deletion. The next in section 2 is what the director talked about. Well, actually, this is the $15. So since now we've created recruitment rates to make sure that every position is paid at least $15, we're just going to take those steps in our matrix with the new fiscal year out, so it doesn't create that confusion visually seeing steps that aren't being used anymore. So the recruitment rates already exist, but they won't be reflected in the future there. So that had a couple changes within both the A and B schedule. We removed language in 2J that talked about per performance positions and having limit them to 11 months. That was just to make sure we're not replacing full-time positions with part-time positions, but now with the new rules, we offer insurance after they reach a certain threshold anyway, so that sort of protection wasn't needed and just created more questions and confusion. Section 7 is where the $1,000 lump sum payment the director talked about, so these are the big changes in there. And then noting that the 3% going forward instead of the 1.5%, but still with the successful or highly successful anniversary rate. So those are pretty much the main changes there. Questions?
Does anybody have any questions? Alderman Rhodey?
Is
Of
this
either one?
okay. I had some, for the first two speakers, and then I was wondering if later on I could ask some of the employment groups
Sure.
that are down here to.
Would you like everyone to speak first and then take questions?
I think that would be
Okay.
best.
Okay.
I'm gonna go back to.
Write down what
I'm gonna-
you,
Since I'm
wanna
finished,
say.
I'm gonna go back. to
okay,
the-
and then who else do you would like to speak
And
on?
also, those of you that are speaking, please sign in. Is this?
Yeah, there it is.
John.
Go first. Okay. I didn't know who you were next.
Mr. Rota, you'd like to testify also?
If I could,
Sure.
Madam Chairwoman.
Yes.
Madam Chairwoman, esteemed committee members, Jeff Rota testifying on behalf of the St. Louis Police Officers Association. I think most of you are aware that we represent around 1,100 commissioned police officers with the City Police Department. What you may not realize is that we represent about another 150 to 200 police civilians and airport police officers who will be directly affected by this raise. Will receive the $1,000 increase. Will receive the 2-3% merit increases over the next 2 years, and for some of our employees, we'll move up to $15 an hour, which some of our critical positions were under $15 an hour. But this doesn't only affect our members who receive the raise, it affects my 1,100 police officers, because the civilian employees who, the supply clerks who order bulletproof vests and bullets, the repair folks down at the garage who keep our police cars in safe running condition, the dispatchers who are on the other end of the radio when our officers need help, are all critical to the mission of the police department and are well deserving of this raise. I can tell you, as Director Frank mentioned, when we negotiate on behalf of the civilians, I provide, and the commissioned officers, I provided a study that we did that showed how far we are behind St. Louis County. $8,200 on average, police officers are behind St. Louis County police officers, over $12,000 behind St. Louis County police sergeants, and I also included police dispatchers in that study, and much to my surprise, I knew things were bad. I didn't realize, in order to make the same amount as a starting dispatcher in St. Louis County, a St. Louis police dispatcher has to work 24 years for the city. I didn't misspeak, that's 24 years of working for the city in order to get up to starting salary in the county. So it's no wonder that we're more than 20% behind. It's no wonder that when people call 911, it takes longer than it should to answer those questions, those emergency calls. It's no wonder that they're doing what's called patching radio channels. So instead of the first district having its own dispatcher, very often the first and second are together, and the third and fourth are together, and the fifth and sixth are together, and the info channel where you run license plates is closed down. So, I mean, this is critical to the police officers that I represent, and critical to the civilians I represent, and the airport officers who are more understaffed than any public safety employees in the city. They're about 35% below their authorized staffing. So we encourage the Board of Aldermen to pass this bill out of committee and on the floor, and thank you for your action, as well as the Department of Personnel.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else that would like to testify? Okay. Seeing no more testimony, I will entertain questions from the committee. Mr. Rhodey, Alderman Rhodey?
I have a few questions for Mr. Frank. We could start. I'm sorry, I was actually on this committee years ago, and I haven't been on it, so I'm kind of new with a lot of the questions. But this will cover all non-uniformed city employees, correct?
That is correct. It would be, actually, this board bill, if passed into law, will cover all employees, and then what I anticipate doing is, as we continue with our negotiations with police and fire, and I hope to reach, a positive agreement with them, then we would be anticipating coming back to, to the Board of Aldermen, asking for the raises for the police and for the firefighters.
Did you say this, so that would be a separate bill for the police and firefighters? So they're not covered by this at all?
They would still be covered by this. It would be an amendment to this. Yes.
Okay. And then, of course, that does not count employees for the county offices.
That is correct. This is civil service only.
Just out of curiosity, how many people altogether are we talking about as far as city employees if the entire table of organization was filled?
If we were looking at the entire filled table of organization, you're looking at 6,721 full-time employees and approximately 300 career seasonals. Those are the very important staff that we hire during the summer months. That usually starts in the spring and ends up late in the fall because we have so many needs. And then in addition, we have per performance employees. And those are our hourly employees that are called in, for varying amounts of hours. And we may have 200 of those, we may have 600 or 700 of those. That varies. It's very fluid because they're not actually budgeted per se in the table of organization.
And of the 6,700, 6,721, then how did that break out among the uniformed? So how many firefighters?
It's about 1,300 uniformed police officers and 700 plus firefighters.
Okay, and then I'm sure that you've taken all this by the budget division and everything. I was pleased to see that we ran a surplus this year, and I've discussed that with the mayor, and I really hadn't had a chance to sit down with the budget director yet. But my understanding is the surplus was, the two major components was we had more revenue growth than we expected, but then a substantial portion of the budget deficit was the budget surplus was the result of unfilled positions.
Yes.
I'm thinking, it's been a few months since I read that, but it was about 50-50, is that right? So $25 million surplus, and about half of it was revenue and half of it was...
Yeah, I'm not sure of what percentage that was. I can say that, that originally we had gotten up to about 1,060 vacancies, and that's gradually, been reduced through some different types of HR efforts to currently it's about 670.
I guess my concern, I wouldn't say it's a concern, God knows the city employees are long suffering, as far as raises go, but, I just get worried about, we obviously need to make the situation more competitive. I'm just a little concerned about, the budget and everything, if we had that much of the surplus was attributable to unfilled positions, and I presume somebody's taken a look at that, and you guys are comfortable with, or the budget division is comfortable with the raises and everything, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the best person to speak to is Paul Payne. I spoke to him yesterday, as a matter of fact, yesterday afternoon. But we also, had input from, the operations department and also from city administration. I can say that we normally budget for the 1.5%. The 1,000 is a one-time only. So, that's taken care of through funding for this year. One of the things that we looked at in arriving at the 3% is St. Louis City and St. Charles County and St. Louis County have been giving their employees 3% for the last several years. We have not even given our employees a raise that is sufficient to cover inflation. Now this year inflation's dropped about 1.67%, but
I am not arguing about the merits of it, I'm just wanting to understand the economics behind it. So, our revenue growth in the city has just been so, anemic for, a very long period of time. And, I think we're finally seeing some growth, but we're in the 10th year of an economic expansion.
I understand.
I'm kind of concerned about what would happen if we end up, it's not if, it's more or less when the next recession comes, how are we gonna be situated? It'd be good if we had the budget director down here. I don't know if it's possible to call him and get him down here.
Can we do
If he
that?
could come, it would be helpful. 'Cause
Yeah,
If he's comfortable with it or not, I'm sure he is.
I can't imagine this would have gotten this far without him being comfortable with it, but it's just, I'd like to kind of hear it from him. One of the things, and I'm not very close to this at all, but I sit back and I listen to the floor debate on city residency and a variety of other things, and one of the complaints that my colleagues make very frequently is the inability of city residents to get, I guess, employed by the city, or I guess there's a lot of debate among board members, and I'm not necessarily a central member of this, I'm more or less somebody sitting back, watching the two sides go at it. One feels that city residency is a real city residency requirement is a real detriment, and another group is saying that there is not enough effort to get, frankly, by your department, to get out in the community and actually provide opportunities for city residents to work for the city. And I thought I'd like to hear it from you, since I have.
yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to address that, because I get weary of hearing the same thing. Quite honestly, I'm here to discuss the compensation ordinance, but in terms
Well,
of.
just so we
terms
put
of
this in,
economics.
let me put it in perspective. Obviously, we're asking for more money here. Money is one of a variety of things that somebody makes a decision on working, where they work at, and if a
We're
residence
terribly
require-
underpaid, absolutely.
Yeah, and so I
I
just
mean,
want to hear your side of the
Yeah.
story, because I'm hearing it on the floor, and I've never asked you about it before.
Yeah, well, now you can hear it directly from me.
Okay.
We have been to 74 different job fairs since January of 2016. I've been out to job fairs at schools, universities as far away as Rolla. We have conducted job fairs within the city itself. We have worked with Slate in collaboration with them to get summer workers. We've asked Slate to give us funds to be able to pay for record checks. We have gone to St. Louis County and asked their police to expedite record check investigations that are necessary for people who are going to be working out with the kids in the schools alone. We have instituted hiring incentives so that if an appointing authority is having difficulty recruiting or retaining employees, we can give them a $1,500 incentive upon completion of their 6-month working testing period. We have instituted a program whereby if a city employee refers someone for another job, they can get $500 for that. And again, that's based on the appointing authority writing to me and having sufficient funds because we are fiscally responsible. We have taken measures in terms of advancing our starting salary because these employees in the city got no raise at all for 2004, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Were furloughed in 2008 and 2009. Management took 2 weeks. The civilian employees who were not management took 1 week. Police and fire were furloughed, but they were then granted back retroactively all of their step increases. So they effectively got 3 years of step increases back in 2009. We have worked diligently to establish relationships with different local groups. When we've hired for firefighters, we've done community outreach. We have gone to churches, we've gone to youth groups, we've gone to Harris Stowe. We're using multimedia approaches. We have found that almost 83% of our employees now are responding on either smartphones or their personal computer rather than paper applications. There's a variety of different efforts that we've held, but unfortunately we have seen that really since about 2014, a number of different things have inhibited us from not only reaching out and keeping people, but hiring them in the first place. One of the things I mentioned was the recruitment rates. I have 2 pages of recruitment rates because we simply can't keep pace with other public sector entities, not to mention any private sector entities. One of the things that we're conducting right now is a salary study, and I think the results are going to be shocking. You can't go this many years and then just give after 2009 $1,000 here per year or $750, and then finally the 1.5%, which I had to fight for. That had a $1.9 million cost, which we were able to absorb. But 1.5%, when you look at the cost of what medical insurance is doing, and then the cost of what you have for inflation, is not sustainable. My eligible lists have now shrunk to where I used to have 100 people apply for an HR specialist. They make $37,000 a year coming in, $37,000. We can't get applicants. This time I have 5 people on the list. So, I take personal umbrage when people say that we have not done anything and that we haven't made an outreach, because I spend a good deal of my life working not on just these issues, but healthcare issues, making them affordable. When you talk about how the city's going to have enough money, the budget director budgets 10% increase for each year for health insurance. Last year, through the efforts of our consultant and my team, we brought it in with a 0% increase to the employees and only $1.6 million increase on a $58 million contract for Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield. This year, my department negotiated down the increase from 6.65% to 2.1%, adding the cost of escalating insurance for the pharmacy benefit is 3.7%. So yet again, we are saving money off of what is projected by the budget division.
Well, I'm not here to make any accusations. I'm sitting
That's what
here
it
trying to
sounds
get
like.
it.
No.
Huh?
That's what it sounds like to me.
No.
I'm here to discuss the compensation.
I tell you, if you feel that that question was accusatory, I told you I have no dog in this fight. I have no firsthand knowledge of this. I'm asking you simple questions about what came up on the board, on the floor of the board, about your department. And I don't recall even ever meeting you before. I don't even know if we've ever talked on the phone.
Actually, you were in one of my meetings about residency where I testified.
Okay, well, I apologize if I don't recall, but I certainly have not, I've had virtual no interaction with your office, with you personally. I have occasionally called your office about maybe health insurance or something like that. I have no firsthand knowledge of anybody who has applied for the city and has not gotten a position. However, I have sat on the floor of the board and I've heard numerous members of the board stand up and say that. Now, I actually supported the legislation to go ahead and put the residency issue back on the ballot to provide the city residents to do that, to have another opportunity to waive that. It's just that to accuse me of accusing you when I'm trying to provide you an opportunity, what I think might make some sense, Madam Chairwoman, is we have Mr. Frank come back, and maybe we can bring a couple of the members in who say that they have firsthand knowledge, and we can get to the bottom of all this stuff, because I don't know who to believe.
Well, let me say this, when we had that bill, Mr. Frank did testify about the hiring practices and what was done, so I think right now what's before us is
Yeah,
this
I
pay
understand
bill.
that, I'm just saying
And
that,
maybe
you know, I
people
think the two are,
pursue that at another time.
yeah.
But in your behalf, I'm just going to interject this. I don't think that Alderman Rota meant that as an accusatory. He was just bringing that forward because that's been something that's been coming up
Right.
that, you know, and I know, many of us know that you have been more than cooperative about having job fairs and so forth. I don't think there was any intent to be accusatory in what he was asking. I think it was just something that he felt as though needed to be brought forward. I apologize.
Thank you.
Okay. Are you,
Well,
you have any more?
yeah, well, I don't wanna take up everybody's, but I, kind of related to, not so much to the residency thing, but to the, do we know, will
We
the?
do have, Paul, let me just say this, Paul Payne cannot come, but however, the mayor's aide is here and he can address the numbers.
I've got all of Paul's numbers.
Okay, I don't mean to dominate the questions, there's other committee members, but
Okay,
is it?
let's get through, are you
Oh.
finished with the questions of Mr. Frank?
Yeah, I would like to have,
Okay.
come back, because I do have some more questions or comments that I'd like to make, but I'm fine. Why don't we
Well, I
give
mean,
somebody, yeah, why don't we give somebody else an
Well, I was
opportunity?
gonna let them all ask questions of Mr.
Sure.
Frank and then have the numbers.
That'd be
presented.
perfect. Thank you,
Is that
Madam
okay?
Chair. Thank
All
you,
right.
Madam Chair.
Okay, Alderwoman Hubbard, Tamika Hubbard.
Thank you, thank you, Madam Chairman. It's funny how we have to say which one is two of us down here. Thank you for coming, and I'll just echo some of the exact sentiments of my colleague. There are some concerns, and not specifically directed to you, but we just know that when we hear from our constituents, I mean, some who aren't concerned about the pay at all, they just simply want a job, they want benefits, and I don't know if it's something that we need to change, but we can't track, like, what happens with that application after it goes through the system. I mean, most times they don't hear anything back. These are for jobs like, I mean, just a grass cutter or whatever. And some seasonal jobs, and like, you know, we'll go above and beyond, we'll write a character letter and all of that stuff, and we just won't hear anything back. And then when it's budget time and you hear all these departments come before us and they say that they have 1,000 jobs still online, and I know that there's people in my community from very humble beginnings who just want a job. It's like, okay, what is the disconnect? What is happening with these applications? And, you know, I don't know how true it is, but we've heard in it, even when it comes down to the police department, you'll send over 150 eligible applicants, and then they'll weave their way through their process, and then we're still short 200 officers. So I think there's a lack of oversight somewhere. I think there's a disconnect. I would like to see through Ways and Means or personnel or whatever, because this big question about residency impacting our number of officers that we are down. I would like to see each eligible applicant. I mean, we could go into closed session. You can blight out all their stuff, because I know there are some human resource parameters you have to go by, and I would like to see why they didn't get the job. Because I know that something is going on somewhere, and I'm not saying it's in your office, but something is happening somewhere, because people want to do the job in spite of the pay. They still want to do the job. And this whole thing about job fairs, I did a 1,000,001 job fairs as an alderperson, and you know, you have hundreds of people come out, but it was almost be like it was just a show for the employers, because you never could see where anybody landed any of those jobs. It's almost like this is a showcase for the community. We want to let you know that we have these jobs, but meanwhile, none of these people are getting hired. So I think that we definitely need to do something different just in that entire regard. And secondly, I wish Paul Payne could come. I mean, I know Conway is well versed, but I would like to see exactly who decided the amount of money. I know there was some negotiations, this one-time $1,000 fee, and I would like to know why, as a body that has to vote on this, why we weren't consulted regarding, okay, you know, we got shortfalls all across the budget, and trust me, they deserve the 1,000. deserve more than that, but I just don't like the fact that we weren't involved in that process at all. And I have some questions about the $15 increase. Over a period of time, have they planned for people who aren't in entry level positions? Are they eventually going to get a bump up?
$15 an hour wage is done under the Compensation Ordinance, Section 2.5.
Okay.
And it has to do with minimum wage for employees. The Director of Personnel retains the discretion to establish different minimum rates of pay. We previously established it at $10.10 per hour for all city civil service employees who are part-time. For full-time employees, because of the city's civil living wage, it was $12.26 an hour. So we still, lagged behind this 15. The $15 an hour is something that now there's been a lot of discussion, on different parties, but it was something that I know that the mayor wanted to effectuate. I felt positively about it, and so issued an administrative regulation to bring that bottom up. Then what my job is after that becomes effective on, I guess, the paycheck February 7th, then what will happen is we will look to see if there's any, what we call salary compression, to see if people who are directly supervising other people have been adversely affected. And then we have that discretion to be able to move those people up so that they retain a gap in their salary between their subordinates. This is all a way of addressing some immediate shortfalls, a stopgate measure until we get the results of the salary study and to see if we're even paying people in the right fashion. Currently we have these 30 steps, 1.5% each for trades and for our general management level people. However, for fire and police, it's very different. They have 30 steps, but most of their big raises are at the beginning. But after they hit year 10 all the way through year 30, they get no more than 0.3%. And so what we see is that police officers, for instance, leave after 3.5 years, and then they leave after 10 years because they hit that spot where they're not vested yet. It takes 20 years to vest, and they then receive just these 0.3% raises, and we see a migration. So that's an important kind of thing. In terms of our process, we just follow the ordinance, which says that, as a negotiator, I'm meeting with the different representatives from the labor unions, and then at that point in time, I have the representative, director of operations, who works with the budget director, sit in on those negotiation sessions, and then I draft up a compensation ordinance and present it to the Civil Service Commission. And the Civil Service Commission at that point holds a public hearing, which it did. And at that point, we had that posted for 5 days as required by the rules, and we held that public hearing. So that's how the process is in terms, and then it comes to, the Board of Aldermen, if so approved by the Civil Service Commission for your inquiry and your determination.
Thank you, and I appreciate you offering that information, because I'm new to this committee, so it's the first time that I've seen that. I did support 15, even though it got overturned, way back when. But when this happened, and clearly none of us knew about it. I just saw it in the media like any John Q. citizen that they would be, getting a raise to $15 an hour. But what happens is then all of your constituents start calling you, or people who are currently working for the city, who make 15 right now, who've been making 15 for the last 5 years. They'll say, well, are we going to get a raise? So I just felt that it should have been more information sharing about that. It was almost like we want this wow factor for even the Board of Aldermen, because I didn't know anything about this $15 increase, and I'm glad that we did get it though. And so what's the total cost of the increase to the city over all the employees? The $1,000 and the 3%? Did you say?
It's a 3%.
What's the total?
It depends on the number of employees who are actually in the
I'm
position.
going to let Conway present as
Oh,
soon as we get through
okay,
this,
okay.
and then he'll talk the numbers. Is
I
that
think
okay?
in
Let me
finishing
see.
too,
What's
Ma'am, if I can respond to the
Okay.
Alderwoman's question about notification, I have my recruitment examination manager here, Brian Beckelman, and he works personally with some of the aldermen when they have questions about constituents, where they're at in the process, if it's been an incomplete application, et cetera. But, I'd be glad to have, Brian speak, if you're so willing. I will say we're making a positive dent in the last several months in the number of vacancies. Went down from 1,060 to 854, 742, 690, and now we're at about 669. So we're seeing that these different incentives, recruitment rates are helping, but they're not necessarily helping us keep people, so that's why we're asking for.
Well, that's great that you all are doing that, and I think it would be good, Madam Chairman, if periodically we can have them come before you, for us, just to let us know where we are, because we still
Okay.
operating off this notion that, you know, people aren't getting hired and we have all these vacancies. So I think that if you are seeing some strides
Yes,
in their
we are.
regard, then that's good.
Okay.
And that's all I have.
I will take that under advisement. Yes,
If any,
stand up.
Sorry.
Bridget Thomas, if anybody has any questions or has somebody that said they filed an application and hasn't heard anything or doesn't know, contact Brian. He will look them up, he will get back to you.
Okay.
And just as an aside, I had someone in my
Yeah.
ward say they applied, and I called and asked them, I said, how's it going? And they said, oh, I haven't heard anything. And I called, well, turned out they didn't even apply.
And that happens
And I
quite a
called them
bit.
back and I said, well, they don't have your application. And they said, oh, I applied online. I said, well, they looked both places. Oh, I said, do you want me to get you another application? No, I'll go down there myself. So I kind of got the idea that,
Yeah. Some people, just so you know,
Is
some,
the online stuff a barrier to some people?
No, we have a room, 700 that's open during all
Oh,
normal
okay,
business
well, they can
hours.
go and
They can
apply.
mail it in, and we have people who even will assist them,
Okay.
you know, with completing the applications. And we've instituted a new policy, which didn't exist before. If it's an incomplete application, we notify the person to make sure that they've got all the information they need to qualify for the jobs. We're required under the charter to test for positions. But what we've done is we've eliminated a lot of the written tests and gone to just a simple review of training and experience or the use of oral boards so that we can hire people more quickly. We're also looking, Alderwoman, at changing some of our requirements. For instance, we had a real shortage of summer seasonal people just to cut the grass. And so my deputy, Linda Thomas, had suggested that we check out the state, any state barriers to lowering the minimum age to 16. So we were able to do that, and then, you know, recruit people from the youth centers, et cetera. So we're always open to other kinds of approaches to see what we can do in the meantime.
Great, thank you.
thank you. Alderwoman Murphy.
No, not at this time. I want to hear them.
Okay. Alderwoman Shamika Hubbard.
No questions at this time.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a question, and this is for Mr. Understall. The list of changes to the previous board bill,
Yeah.
do we have that in this packet? I didn't notice it as I went through, but do we have that?
No, not on list. I can get you.
Can you share that with
Yes,
us
sure.
also? Okay, I think that would be a big help for us to notice the changes from the previous bill. If you wouldn't mind mailing that to the clerk and get it to us.
Okay.
Okay. And then I had one more, wait a minute. Oh, that's it. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, Mr. Conway, would you please explain the numbers in this? Would you identify yourself?
Okay, I will.
For those
Let's
of
see,
us that
I'm
don't know
Steve
you.
Conway, Mayor Cruzen's Chief of Staff.
Okay.
And you know what, I feel a little bad that maybe you guys didn't see it all coming when we did the $15 an hour. I think our press release had these things, these other things in there. I know that the $15 seemed to be a big wow factor. It was important to everybody. And I know that the Personnel Department has done a phenomenal job really working with us over the last year. Like you said, we were over 1,000 vacancies. There's 6,000 employees. You're running at 15% vacancy here in the city. We couldn't get tree trimmers last summer. We went through all of these machinations, and we have an obligation to make sure, a couple of things, that we provide the services that the residents want, that we treat our employees fairly. And over the past decade, if you look back, and those of you who've been here over the Ways and Means Committee, I mean, some years we were doing furloughs, we were doing no pay raises. You know, I think one year we did like 1%. I can't even remember all the years, but we had years where we didn't do it. Out in St. Louis County, they've been doing 3% over the years. Last year, the city had a $23 million surplus, premised on a couple of factors: increased earnings tax, and the vacancies created a tremendous amount. But then on the flip side of it, the vacancies in the police department cost us overtime. We know that that is coming again this year, and I have those additional numbers. Our earnings tax collections are up 5.2%, which is above the projection. We started the year over 1,000 vacancies, and the work that the personnel department has done over time, working with us to get these classifications corrected, that work has gotten us down to about 690, which is really important. But for most of the year, I was at 1,000. The collections are up. So I'm going to give you the numbers really quick on that. These are just Paul Payne's numbers. The $1,000 pay increase, which is a one-shot deal, which allows us to use up some of the surplus this year because we haven't appropriated it all out yet, is $3,472,000. $472,000. The civilian merit increase at 3%. I said $3,472,000 out of general revenue. Out of enterprise funds, could be the airport or the water department. That's another $616,000. So slightly more than $4 million. Now, the 3% increase last year, this committee did a 1.5% for all city employees. So this would just be doubled. So instead of $2 million out of general funds, what you guys approved last year, for next year it would be $4 million. So the amount of increase is $2 million more than last year's increase.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that doesn't make any sense at all. Steve, that's just $1,000 would imply that.
This is only civil service employees. It does not include the
But
police.
how does $1,000 equate to $4 million and a 3% pay raise equals $4 million?
Well,
That
because
would mean that our average compensation would be, less than $30,000 a person.
well, well, I haven't given you the enterprise fund, or the other grant, So under the enterprise funds, we'll come back on that. I've got, I gave you the 4 million, and then under enterprise, it's 1.4 million. Okay. It does not include the police or the fire. They'll have.
That 5.4 does not include?
No.
Okay.
And then actually, there's some special grant funds that really doesn't, none of this impacts general revenue, and that would be on top of that, another 1.2 million, but that's just out of grants, it has nothing to do with us. So, last year, for the last couple of years, 3 or 4 years, we've been doing 1.5%. St. Louis County's been doing 3%. So our employees have continued to fall further and further behind each year. So we're basically doubling what we gave last year. So the combined total, if you half that, is what the extra cost is on that 3% increase. We negotiate with each of the collective bargaining units, and heretofore they've, given that we had dire economic circumstances for many, many years, we didn't have this growth in the budget, and we didn't have such a large number of vacancies. So we're trying to accomplish 2 things. One is to make up some of the shortage that we had and the underpayment of our employees, because even though I know Rick is saying he's done a good job keeping our insurance premiums down. I think we've had marginal increase each year. But when you give an employee 1.5%, and it's every year for the last 4 or 5 years, and that's the biggest problem you see around here, I can't get employees in. But we have to treat our current employees well, and we have the economic wherewithal to do that.
Questions?
Yep.
Alderman Brody?
I'm sorry, sorry. So what you're saying is the all-in cost of the 1,000, which would cover all city employees, is that right? Fire and police?
No, the fire and police are not included in that.
Okay.
They're gonna have a separate pay bill coming in July.
Okay, so that was 4 million, and that's a one-time thing, so that's, you know,
Right.
we're gonna pay that, and then that's not gonna, that's not a recurring expense then. So then
Well, in theory it is, because
oh,
that
is it
is
a
a,
$1,000 pay raise, or is it a
it is a $1,000 pay raise.
Okay,
So, I'm not
Per
gonna.
year? I mean, like if they make 32, they'll make 33?
forever then.
Right,
Correct.
Okay,
until something else.
Because you gotta remember, we didn't give them these increases
okay.
over the
Okay,
past
see, I
year.
didn't realize that.
Hold on, wait a minute, let's go on.
No, we're not by law, and I think I checked with Rick, I cannot give you a bonus.
I thought it was a one-time thing on one check.
That's what they made
It is coming on one check, your pay raise for the year is coming on one check.
Now,
but
let
you're-
me ask you this, will the 3% be based on the increase? In other words, if you're going from
Well, of
32 to
course.
33? Okay, all right. So what is,
I mean, I didn't mean to be so
okay,
facetious.
what is, in other words, now this will be off of fiscal year 2019 and 20, correct?
Well, in theory, the way that our budget book says it, and the way us accountants think of it, we're in fiscal year 20 right now.
Right,
That'll end June 30th. So that 1,000 will come out of this,
okay,
okay? And I know that, and I'm gonna pay it in one lump to get it out of the budget.
okay.
And then when you go to July 1st, well, the new pay bill will be in. And on the employee's anniversary date, they'll get a 3% increase.
So if you can't do a bonus, and it's treated as a one-time salary increase, if somebody's been with the city for 6 months, will they still get the $1,000 bonus? If they haven't been for the full year?
If they're employed on the date, April 1st, March 29th, they get it.
So if they got hired on March 28th, they get a $1,000.
Please come to City Hall and fill out your application.
Okay, that's a nice signing bonus. So then, and then,
Mention this in-
so that would in effect be ongoing, so that's $4 million. And then the 3% pay raise is gonna be somewhat north of 5.5 million when you start adding in. So that's, and so that would be, well, we're probably well north of 10 million then.
Right, and the 5.4, you gotta remember, we would have done 2.7 of it anyway.
Steve, I'm just trying to understand how that's gonna impact. So out of the $23 million surplus that we had last year, my recollection was about half of it was from growth of revenue, and the other half was from vacancies. Is that correct?
So it's probably, and there was another factor in there, and I can't even, just off the top of my head, but it's a combination of those things. The revenue, grew faster than we projected.
Now, Paul historically uses what, about a 1.5% revenue growth rate when he does the budget, is that right?
Well, I think he used this year like 2.2 on the earnings tax, and I think we're at 5.2. So,
And the earnings tax represents what, about 40% of the general fund then?
yes. Here, I might even have the exact number.
Yeah, and I'm gonna wear everybody out with my questions. I
No.
probably just need to call Paul up. I've been meaning to ask him, spend some time with him
Let's
anyway.
Let me, I have the mid-year report somewhere here, and I'll pull that up as we keep going. I just saw it. I went to the other report.
I'm just trying to figure out how much of the pay raise is a result of true revenue growth versus how much of it is a result of us, how much of the budget surplus is a result of growth versus vacancies, but,
So here's the two things that he sent me to follow up. I mean, this is amazing. Our earnings tax was concluded the mid-year report. It was up 5.2%. And now some of that included that we were getting some back taxes. That's 5.2%. Because the jobs are growing here in the city of St. Louis. at an astronomical pace. Sales tax in the city, now think about this, was up 1.1%. If you follow the newspaper, I think St. Louis County is down. I mean, that's one of their problems, is they're not getting what they perceive. Now, originally in this budget, for this budget year, he had, it did have salary savings due to vacancies of $4.7 million. So those are the two things I just
So
wanted to
if
know.
we would, what would happen if we would fill all those vacancies?
Well, first of all, we can't fill them all that fast. Rick's office said they've done a good job. This is not going to get them filled. What I'm really hoping is that at least when I start the summer, because he's doing this compensation study, and I don't know if he mentioned that, but that's coming so that the wage compression, and that'll allow us to open up the gap a little bit. But in order for us to get, I need refuse drivers, trash gets out of control. I have to do my grass cutting, and I got to do my tree trimmings. The forestry things, those have to be done this summer. That's what your residents want. I have to pay a wage to get these employees in. So, our initial efforts, is really try to get those, because that's kind of a one-time occurrence. That's what's going to hit the residents right away. The other things on some of the more like professional backgrounds are skilled labor jobs. And he's worked on changing the classifications to get the pay better. But the study that will come out in March, we hope, or whatever the date is, will give us a better idea. But there's no way I'm going to get, even with this $1,000, I mean, to you and I and to many people, that $1,000 is a lot of money, and so is 3%. But that's not going to move people out of current jobs. But it will get me more people. I mean, it's been a struggle to get from 1,000 down to 6, whatever we have right now. But I'm not going to fill these up instantly, and you'll always have a certain amount of vacancies on a regular basis going forward.
Okay. Alderman, from the 17th, you have...
Yeah, I guess my point of clarification here, and then, is the 5.2% for, for the growth of salary revenue, and is that like pre-allocation for TIF and everything like that then? So I'm getting
that's
kind of
true
in the
collections.
weeds. So that's after the special allocation
Yeah.
funds and everything. Okay. I think I'm pretty familiar with the job growth. I think a lot of it's occurring in my area, and
Yeah, we think
been
so,
working
too.
very, very hard on that for a long time. Which, if I could, like to bring up one other thing is, and I think it's all related to this. We talk a lot about this over in the HUD's committee. There's two ways of growing revenue for a public entity. One way is to increase taxes, and the second way is to grow your tax base. Your tax base times your tax rate gives you your total collection. And for a long time, I think our city has not focused on the growth of tax base. And when we run into a problem, we increase the tax rate, which solves the problem in the short term, but doesn't in the long term. And the way that most local governments, there's a few exceptions, Ladue would be an exception, but most local governments overtax businesses and then takes that and use that extra money to provide services for their residents, and that way they keep their service, their residents' taxes lower. It's natural enough. Your residents are voters and the businesses can't vote, so it's always easy to pass tax measures that tax somebody who doesn't have to pay them. But that's how all local governments work, and if you want to see that played out in the real world, travel. And when you go to travel, you go to a hotel room and you'll find out that you get a 20% tax rate, or you rent a car, and that's because people in that municipality want you to help pay the cost of keeping up Chicago or Orlando or wherever you're going to. And what we have been trying to do in HUD's is get a much better understanding of how our incentive programs have worked, and we've done a lot of work on it. And I don't mean to talk down to anybody, because I think anybody here who spends enough time on it can figure it out. It's just that it's extremely complex, and what may look kind of intuitively like we're giving money away to businesses or we're giving money away to certain residents, when you analyze it in more depth, what happens is we really are trying to grow the tax base. We don't necessarily make all of our money on real estate taxes. We make money on personal property taxes, we make money on sales taxes, we make money on earnings taxes, and in order for us to be...
taxes.
All kinds of taxes that we have. And in many cases, the old adage that 50% of something is better than 100% of nothing is unfortunately because of our region, and we have municipalities in the suburbs that compete with us and are willing to go ahead and give up part of their taxes so that they can bring that, you know, Clayton wants to take our jobs from downtown, they offer tax abatement. We were competing with Fenton for IKEA, so we had to go ahead and give IKEA something, and we have spent a lot of time trying to understand how that works. And we have a lot of people in our community, you know, who question that. I'll give you an example how that works. If you're an airline and you're flying your airline from St. Louis to New York and it's half full, and you got all the people to pay the full boat, but you know you're 3 weeks before the plane takes off and you're half empty, it's still gonna cost you the same to fly up there, but if you cut your ticket prices, you might end up getting a whole lot more people on the airplane than you otherwise might. And that's what we're trying to do with incentives. In the business, they call that dynamic pricing. And we have a number of unions represented here. When unions frequently negotiate, it's my understanding, with perhaps businesses that might be struggling, and they're sitting there trying to figure out, you know, is the owner of this business really giving us the, you know, are they giving us the fair share? Are they hiding something in the books? A lot of times they'll get their people, or they will hire somebody to kind of come in and take a look at it. And I tell you, this incentive stuff is a way for the city, if we do it right, to make money, and it helps for us all to have confidence in the system. And we have spent a lot of time on that. If the unions are interested in getting together and paying somebody, you know, to look at what we've done and participate in, I don't know if we can formally put them in the decision-making process, but you know,
In the HUD's committee, you mean?
well, not necessarily in the HUD's committee
Just
or even
as
in the
far as the
approval
incentives.
process, but just to understand how the model works and take a look and analyze what we're doing. What I don't think helps the city at all is for all of us to kind of think about this as if we're not in it together. And if we can figure out ways for the unions that are our employees, not just the unions, but all of our employees, to think about what we can do to grow tax base and then have some confidence in the process that we are really working on that. You know, and that's an important component. The more we grow our tax base, the more likely we have the ability to go ahead and pay to keep up things. And what doesn't help us, I think, as elected officials, is to have people thinking with a lot of cynicism that, you know, what we're doing to attract IKEA or Square or some of these other businesses to come to the city is what we don't need, is to have this kind of division or level of suspicion. And as far as I'm concerned, you know, I am more than willing to have anybody who spends the time and effort to look over our shoulders at what we've done in the HUD's committee. And I welcome that, because I'm very, you know, not that we're perfect, but I think if people looked at what we've done and look actually at post-incentive on what's going on in Cortex and some of our other areas, that they will see that there's substantial revenue growth as a result of tax base growth, which is what is really healthy. So I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit on my soapbox,
Okay, but
but
I would
anybody
like to-
representing the employees that are here today and would like to, you know, think about a way, I will work diligently to try to encourage SLDC
And
to
I would-
open up our books and provide you a front row seat. in
And I
what
would
we're
like
doing
to
over there.
say, finally, that, you know, maybe our budget surplus, I think a lot of our budget surplus is due to the growth that has come about in the city in the central corridor downtown and other areas. And I think that's what we need to look at
The
as far
views
as,
win.
Yeah.
we all win.
Yeah.
We all win.
And, you know, we have Professor Hollins here. I mean, he's been an addition, Jonathan Ferry. We have a lot of, I think, we don't have a lot. We should have a lot, but we have a couple of very smart people that we've been able to recruit. We actually could use more to be looking at these things. But I think we're making progress on it, and I am, you know, I am very willing and open and would work with any of the employee unions to sit down and look for it, because frankly, the more people that see what we're doing, I think we can go ahead and dispel some of the cynicism that might exist with some of the employees out there about what's going on in that area.
Well, thank you, Alderman Rhodey, and I will, if there's anyone interested, please follow up with Alderman Rhodey if you're all interested in learning more about how incentives work for the benefit of the city. Alderwoman Hubbard, do you have?
No, I don't have any.
Okay. Alderwoman Murphy?
I'll say what he said. I think, because I think your main question was, are these raises and incentives, are they sustainable? I think was what maybe you were trying to get at, you know, and you're telling us that you think they're sustainable, even if they're, you know, a recession, I mean, not, you know, in
Well,
a
recession's
couple, 2
coming.
years, 3 years.
Recessions come and go.
Right.
St. Louis gets impacted more slowly.
That's true.
It comes slower,
You
and
go down slow.
it comes down slower,
Yeah.
and we go back up slower. But the one thing is, when you look at downtown, and I mean, this is a sales pitch for my boss. You look throughout your neighborhoods, and you look on Grand and the Kings Highway North and South, Kings Highway North and South Grand. You see it with your own eyes. When you see that Square's gonna add 1,400 jobs downtown. Cortex is already at 6, they're getting ready to add another 2,000 jobs in that area. Those are all good paying jobs, and you know what that means? That means tax revenues for the city of St. Louis, and that's a growing tax base. And then, you know, earnings tax is inflation sensitive too, so that depending on how the economy goes, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball.
No.
How the economy goes, but if it's high inflation, that earnings tax moves up. We get very little of the monies from property tax and real estate taxes. And again, I even look at Paul's number. We historically just don't really pay that much attention to sales tax because it's so stagnant. We're in Jeff City right now trying to get our fair share under what they call the Wayfair rule that the Republicans are fighting among themselves. But we're missing out on a lot of tax that 48 out of the other states in this country are getting the tax on their internet sales, and the state of Missouri is not. And that would be another revenue stream that already belongs here. And so, you know, we're working on it. It's just difficult. But we see the growth, and I hope you see that with your own eyes. I can't guarantee the future.
I see rehab dumpsters all over my neighborhood, and I love that. No, that's all. No more.
Alderwoman Shamika Hubbard.
Shameen.
Shamika, I'm sorry.
Tamika.
Yeah,
Shameen, I'm sorry, I
My
apologize.
questions too were just about sustainability, so I was waiting on the numbers and to hear from you. And I know you don't have a crystal ball, but you know, I'm new and I'm learning. So I do have a question about worst case, what would happen in a recession? And I know I can reach out to Paul on that, or I don't know if
Well,
I could answer that.
since I was the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee longer
time.
than any other alderman,
Oh my goodness.
I got to see mostly the bad times as we shrunk our payroll over the years, and we did a furlough year. That was about 6 or 7
Well, that
years
was
ago.
what I got emailed about, was the furlough.
Okay, so we had to do a furlough, and I mean, we will have to respond if we get that, but the impact is the bigger we build our tax base, and even though we don't know exactly how the population's gonna come out, it'll probably be fairly close to what, I mean, I don't know. I got a little bit of a shine on my crystal ball there, but we're gonna be younger, and we're gonna have more people paying taxes, because you don't pay, if you're retired and you're getting pensions, IRAs, or Social Security, you don't pay any earnings tax. The young people coming in here they're hooked for 30 years. You know, they got a mortgage, they have all of those things. They're here for 30 years. And so we are replacing our older population with the younger population and young people, you all know, you're at the beginning of your earnings years, and they will continue to grow until you get to, you get to 65, whatever the case might be. So we can't guarantee, but we have encountered many of the recessions since I've been down here, and that was 1990. So we've been through a couple, and the worst one was a furlough year, and that was about 6 or 7 years ago. We let each
10,
department,
right.
10 years ago,
It was 2010.
2010.
It was elected.
And so if we have to, our biggest expense is wages and personal services in our budget. So, that would have to be accommodated if we got to that point.
Any further questions? Yes, you would like to add?
Yeah, I would just like to say that in terms of sustainability, because I think that is important, these agreements are 3 years. There's a wage reopener for the third year, and our projections are we're comfortable that we're going to make that 3%. I can tell you I've just met with actuaries from FRP as well as Employees Retirement System, and they are saying 3% wage growth for the employees of ERS and 2.75% for the firefighters under FRP. And what that means is, with all the people who are leaving and coming and promotions and vacancies, that's what their best estimate is based on their actuarial evaluations. But we have discussed with the unions that in the third year of this agreement, we have a very rich benefit plan. We may have to take that off. One of the things that we're looking at is the cost of what those benefits are, and not one size fits all. So that's something that we're looking at in the third year is what best suits employees. What do you need? If your value of your benefits is $10,000, how do you, maybe we can get that down to 8 and let you choose. So that's something we've been talking to the unions about.
Along with that, I have a question. Is the salary study including,
It
does
is.
look at the benefits?
It
So
is.
that'll be, in other words, it won't be up for negotiation on this 3
It is.
years, but on the next 3 years, it'll be something that will be
Correct.
on the table.
And just to clarify one point, not to contradict Steve, but this one payment of $1,000 is for this year only. It does not, if you make $10,000, it doesn't make you go to 11, then you drop back down to 10.
Okay, and I'm
So
sorry.
it's a one-time, and
And I was
it's,
like,
It's
how
a
we gonna
bonus. It's
find
more
out
like
from
a
you?
Mayor's office lying to us again.
we don't like the term bonus,
Right.
throw some shade on the law
Okay,
department. Bonuses
and I'm sorry.
are not legal under the Missouri Constitution. So it's one time, and that makes it more, it uses that surplus. And anytime, our unions have been fantastic, anytime we've come back to them and said, we're in trouble. That's why in 2008, 2009, we did the furloughs, so. Thank you, Alderman.
And then that's why I'm sorry that they get the 3%.
And just for clarity, I want to make sure people understand, this is for civil service employees, not the county offices.
That is correct.
Okay.
Now, the county offices
Normally follows.
will follow what we do.
Right. So, any further questions from the committee, from anyone? Does anyone else want to speak? Okay, that said, I take no more testimony.
I don't know, is it probably some Friday before the session?
I will entertain a motion
So
to
moved.
pass Board Bill 200 and move it to the floor for
I move we
final
pass
pass.
Board Bill 200 out of committee with a due pass recommendation.
Second.
Moved and seconded,
Take the roll.
call the roll.
Alderman Rhodey,
Aye.
Alderman Vollmer, Alderwoman Hubbard,
Aye.
Alderwoman Murphy,
Aye.
Alderman Bosley, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Chairwoman Howard.
Aye.
5 aye votes.
Is there anyone interested in co-sponsoring this?
I am.
Okay. Add Alderwoman Murphy as a co-sponsor.
What's the timeline on, when the, police officers and firefighters amendment will come to this? Do you know when that'll happen?
It's in negotiations.
I'm saying in order to get this out, if we're gonna add an amendment to it, we have to anticipate it it's coming pretty soon, right?
Yeah, I think there'll be a separate amendment. We're hopeful that the board will pass this out
As it
and
is.
as is, and we're looking to possibly look at reducing costs in the police retirement system. We're working with Mr. Rota, who, I don't know if he's still here or not.
He
I
had
mean, is this
someplace
something we can expect this session, or is
Yes.
it? Oh, okay,
Yes.
so they'll get a raise too.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're
Okay.
working now on just with the budget director, with the unions about how we might be able to free up some money to make sure that those increases are sustainable as well.
Okay.
So I'd be glad to come back and talk about that when, obviously when that occurs, which I think would be probably about April.
Oh, so it won't be in this session?
No, it won't be this, it'd be after the board recesses.
Okay, that's what I was wondering, I'm like,
Okay.
we're gonna be back here in a week?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've passed
I'll,
Board Bill 200, and,
I keep
I'll
meaning to do it, I'll
entertain a
try to
motion to
invite him to come
adjourn.
down
I move
on
we
a Friday,
adjourn.
maybe before the
So
closed
moved.
session.
Meeting adjourned.
Look at this.